In the world of law enforcement, danger doesn't always come from the streets. It often hides in silence, in shadows, in the places no one thinks to look. Tonight, we revisit one of the most haunting disappearances in FBI history. A case that began as a routine ride home and ended as one of the most confounding mysteries of the decade. If you're drawn to stories of real-life disappearances, unexplained vanishings, and cases that leave more questions than answers, make sure to subscribe, like, and stay till the end, because this story takes a turn few could have ever imagined. In the spring of 2010, Special Agent Daniel Harlow finished his shift at the FBI's Seattle field office just after sunset. The air was calm, the streets mostly empty, and the hum of his patrol bike echoed softly against the concrete. Riding home was his usual routine, a short trip through familiar roads, nothing out of the ordinary. Daniel had been with the Bureau for nearly a decade, known for his discipline, sharp instincts, and a quiet sense of duty that made him respected by his peers. Off-duty, he was a husband, a father of one, and an endurance cyclist who loved the solitude of night rides. That evening, he texted his wife at 9:47 p.m., just one word, heading home. It was the last message she would ever receive from him. When the clock passed midnight and Daniel hadn't returned, his wife called his phone repeatedly, no answer. She assumed he'd been delayed or had taken an unexpected detour. But when dawn broke and his bike route was empty, panic set in. By morning, the Seattle Police Department and FBI Internal Affairs had joined forces to search the wooded bike trails Daniel used daily. His colleagues refused to believe an experienced agent could simply vanish, especially one trained to detect danger before it arrived. Yet as hours turned into days, not a single clue emerged. No tire marks, no bike, no trace of struggle. It was as if Daniel Harlow had been erased from the route he'd ridden 100 times before. In the days following Agent Daniel Harlow's disappearance, the FBI launched one of the largest internal search efforts in the Pacific Northwest. What began as a missing persons report rapidly escalated into a full-scale federal investigation. Daniel's last known location was traced through his phone's GPS signal, which abruptly went offline near the Ravens Hollow Trail, a narrow and isolated biking route just outside of Tacoma. The area was familiar to Daniel. He'd ridden it countless times. The strange part wasn't that he was there, it was that the signal ended in a dead zone, with no sign of distress, struggle, or interference. His bike was never recovered. No sign of skidding, no broken branches, no discarded items. It was as though the path had swallowed him whole. The investigation's early stages focused on two main theories. One, that Daniel had been the victim of an ambush, possibly tied to an ongoing investigation he'd been leading into a corruption network involving former contractors. Two, that he'd disappeared willingly, perhaps under duress, or had staged his vanishing to protect himself or his family. But neither theory held up. His financial accounts were untouched, his home life appeared stable, and no threats were ever documented. Surveillance cameras near the area showed nothing, no vehicles following, no pedestrians nearby. Within weeks, the public narrative began to shift. Local media questioned how an FBI officer, equipped with GPS trackers, surveillance awareness, and self-defense training, could disappear without leaving a single clue. Then came a quiet internal memo leaked months later. The Bureau had found partial evidence near a remote logging road, fragments of torn fabric matching the reflective strips of an FBI biking jacket. But they didn't disclose it to the public. Not yet. Among colleagues, whispers started to grow. Some believed Daniel had uncovered something within the Bureau itself, something that made him a target. Others thought he'd become lost, met with an accident, and was simply never found due to the area's rough terrain. The truth was, nobody knew. And as the seasons changed and years began to pass, the case slowly drifted into the realm of forgotten files. But Daniel's wife never stopped searching. By the time 5 years had passed since Daniel Harlow's disappearance, his case had officially gone cold. New agents had come and gone, files had been archived, and only a few still whispered his name in the halls of the Bureau. His wife, Rebecca Harlow, refused to accept closure. Every anniversary, she would visit the same trail where Daniel's signal had last been traced. She'd stand by the faded missing person sign, its edges curled by rain, and whisper the same promise, "I'm still looking." Then, in 2015, something unexpected surfaced. A small team of forestry workers, clearing debris near a ravine 2 miles off the main bike path, found an object lodged between two rocks, a helmet, coated in moss, cracked along the side, with faint markings of the FBI insignia still visible beneath the dirt. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable. But when investigators analyzed it, they discovered a series of faint scratches etched along the back rim, markings that weren't caused by natural wear. They appeared deliberate, as though someone had used the helmet to carve something against a surface. Under magnification, 3 distinct letters were identified: R, H, V. To the FBI, it was just another piece of damaged evidence. But to Rebecca, it was everything. The initials matched the name of an internal investigation Daniel had been overseeing before he disappeared, the Ravens Hollow Violations File, codename RHV, a classified case involving potential misuse of Bureau resources and covert land acquisitions around the same area where he'd vanished. The Bureau reopened the case, quietly this time, without media attention. Forensic teams returned to Ravens Hollow, combing through the overgrowth and soil near where the helmet had been found. The deeper they dug, the stranger the terrain became. Sections of unmarked fencing, abandoned surveillance poles, and remnants of what looked like a makeshift observation post buried beneath years of fallen leaves. The discovery reignited questions that had been buried since 2010. Had Daniel stumbled onto something that night, something the Bureau never intended to be found? And if so, who wanted him gone? When the helmet was recovered and analyzed, it led investigators to revisit Daniel Harlow's old case files. Many were locked behind clearance levels higher than what most field agents had access to. Inside the Bureau, a small task force was assembled to quietly re-examine his final assignments. Among those assignments was a sealed dossier marked RHV, Ravens Hollow Violations. The file had been opened only 3 times between 2008 and 2010. The last recorded access was by Agent Harlow himself, just 48 hours before he disappeared. Inside the file were scattered reports referencing an abandoned property near the trail, owned by a private security subcontractor that had once partnered with the FBI. The reports suggested the site had been used for training and data collection. But there was no record of what kind of data was being gathered, or why the project was abruptly shut down in 2009. Then there was a single memo written in Daniel's handwriting, preserved in scanned archives. It read, "There's something off about the Ravens Hollow operation. I've seen logs that shouldn't exist. If anyone reads this later, follow the coordinates I marked." But the coordinates he referenced weren't in the file. They'd never been attached to the report, nor could digital recovery tools find them in his archived device data. The investigation took an unexpected turn when one retired analyst came forward. She claimed Daniel had contacted her the week before his disappearance, asking about satellite imaging of Ravens Hollow, specifically about heat signatures detected in the region after midnight. She said Daniel told her he believed someone was still using the area, despite the Bureau declaring it inactive. When investigators returned to that same site in 2015, new scans revealed faint but irregular metal signatures buried beneath the ground, too symmetrical to be natural, yet too deep to identify without excavation permits. The Bureau halted further digging, citing environmental restrictions. Still, the whispers began again. Within internal circles, rumors claimed Daniel had discovered an off-the-book surveillance compound, one that might have been monitoring not foreign threats, but domestic agents themselves. If that was true, it explained why his file was buried, and why his disappearance had been treated with such quiet finality. But what remained unexplained was the helmet's reappearance. Who placed it there? Why after 5 years? And what did those carved letters truly mean? As the reopened inquiry progressed, one detail became impossible to ignore. Every piece of data connected to Ravens Hollow ended in 2009, just months before Daniel vanished. It was as if the Bureau had deliberately erased the site's existence from its official records. When environmental contractors were granted limited permission to clear sections of the area for public safety, they stumbled upon something unexpected: a sealed hatch, half buried under years of dirt and roots. It appeared man-made, reinforced with steel, and roughly 8 feet wide. There were no markings or official serial codes, but corrosion revealed faint lettering, "Property of Federal Operations, 2007. The hatch was located less than 200 yards from where Daniel's helmet was discovered. Once again, the FBI took over the scene, this time under strict secrecy. Local workers were dismissed, and what happened afterward was never made public. Yet leaked reports from a subcontracted analyst suggested that the hatch led to a small underground chamber, no larger than a basement room, containing old computer terminals, obsolete surveillance equipment, and decaying storage drives. Most of the data was corrupted beyond recovery, but fragments of footage were said to have survived. The files appeared to be surveillance logs, time-stamped between 2007 and 2009, showing thermal readings, timestamps, and faint movement patterns across the same trail Daniel used every night. Some reports claimed that one of those final recordings showed a biker entering the frame on April 9, 2010, matching the date of Daniel's disappearance, except, according to metadata, that footage was logged 3 days after he vanished. If true, it meant someone had access to his route, his schedule, and the means to replicate it. Publicly, the Bureau dismissed these claims as speculative. Privately, several retired agents believed Daniel's helmet had been deliberately planted, either as a warning or as a silent confession by someone still within the system. In internal documents, investigators wrote that the underground chamber had been dismantled and sealed again. No reason was given. Whatever Daniel had stumbled upon in Ravens Hollow, it was bigger than one agent, one investigation, or one missing case file. It was something meant to stay buried, literally and institutionally. By late 2015, the mystery of Agent Daniel Harlow had become something of a quiet legend within the Bureau. To the public, his case remained classified as unresolved disappearance during off-duty travel. But behind closed doors, agents, analysts, and even retired officers had their own theories, each more unsettling than the last. The first theory was internal, that Daniel had uncovered a surveillance project so sensitive it couldn't risk exposure. Ravens Hollow, according to unconfirmed sources, was not just a training site, it was an observation hub, built during a time of internal paranoia when parts of the Bureau had begun monitoring their own field agents. Daniel, known for his ethics and transparency, might have stumbled across the existence of such a program and attempted to report it. His disappearance, under that theory, was not random, it was containment. The second theory was external. Some believed Daniel was the victim of an unauthorized joint operation between federal contractors and private defense agencies that had used the Ravens Hollow region for experimental communications testing. Under this angle, his disappearance was an accident, collateral damage that was covered up to avoid public exposure and liability. Then came the third theory, one that spread quietly through online communities after the helmet's discovery, that Daniel had discovered something in those woods, something non-human. Locals around Ravens Hollow spoke of strange lights at night, unmarked trucks entering closed zones, and the eerie hum of generators deep within the forest after midnight. None of it could be verified, but the whispers refused to die. Rebecca, Daniel's wife, clung to a simpler belief, that he had been silenced for finding the truth about Ravens Hollow. She began reaching out to journalists, retired FBI staff, and podcasters who specialized in cold cases. In 2017, her persistence led to one breakthrough, a private investigator who obtained access to internal emails from 2010. Among them was a single undelete message sent from Daniel's Bureau account hours before his phone went dark. The email contained only one line: "If something happens, start with the Hollow." It was enough to reignite everything: the fear, the questions, and the sense that Daniel had left behind a trail more deliberate than anyone had realized. But even as attention returned to the case, something peculiar began happening to those trying to investigate further. Two journalists claimed they received cease and desist letters citing federal security interference. One retired agent who spoke anonymously about the case stopped responding to calls altogether. The story of Daniel Harlow had gone beyond a disappearance. It had become a boundary between truth and what the government was willing to let the public know. In early 2018, nearly 8 years after Daniel Harlow's disappearance, a low-level IT technician working in data recovery at the Bureau's archival division stumbled upon something unusual. While updating legacy storage drives, he discovered a series of encrypted folders hidden under mislabeled digital tags. They carried timestamps from April 2010, the same week Daniel went missing. At first glance, the data appeared corrupted, filled with fragmented code and broken file paths. But when decrypted, small pieces began to emerge, records that were never meant to be seen. Among the recovered data were partial logs titled RHV Recon Submissions, containing encrypted video references, transcribed summaries, and system updates from a classified surveillance network. One line stood out. Subject Harlow observed entering perimeter at 21:52. Tracking lost at point Delta 7. Retrieve and classify event. The report's timestamp was April 9, 2010, the exact time Daniel's phone signal disappeared. When the technician reported it to his superior, the files were immediately seized and reclassified under internal order. The employee was reassigned to a separate division within days. No explanation was given. Still, the leak made its way to Rebecca Harlow through an anonymous source claiming to be someone who believed Daniel's story shouldn't be buried. The source provided a partial copy of one of the logs, an image of a topographical map showing multiple heat signatures along the Ravens Hollow Trail the night Daniel vanished. Experts who reviewed the leaked image noticed something disturbing. One of the signals appeared to mirror Daniel's cycling route perfectly, while another, larger and motionless, waited near the area where his GPS cut off. Theories intensified. Some claimed Daniel had been lured there by a false distress signal. Others believed the Bureau was tracking him under suspicion of leaking information. But the data's existence proved one thing: the Bureau had never stopped watching Ravens Hollow. When journalists reached out for comment, officials issued a familiar statement. We can neither confirm nor deny the existence of the documents in question. To the public, it was another unsolved disappearance. To those who had seen the files, it was confirmation that Daniel Harlow's final ride was not an accident. It was surveillance turned inward. In late 2018, just months after the leaked digital record surfaced, the Ravens Hollow case was quietly reclassified once again, this time under the designation Internal Containment, Restricted Access. It was the final bureaucratic seal, ensuring no civilian inquiry or external audit would reopen the file without top-level clearance. Yet what happened next was something no clearance could explain. In January 2019, a park ranger station 30 miles north of Ravens Hollow filed an incident report about an unmarked storage container discovered near the edge of an abandoned service road. Inside, he found rusted tools, corroded storage bins, and several personal items. Among them, a biking shoe that matched the brand and model Daniel Harlow wore. The ranger turned the items over to local authorities, who immediately contacted the FBI. But before any forensic tests could be run, the storage unit was cleared overnight by a separate agency team. No inventory list was released. Then, in February, a driver passing through the same area reported a strange sight: a lone figure standing near the trail entrance at dawn, wearing what looked like a faded bureau jacket. The man didn't respond when approached. By the time deputies arrived, there was no trace of anyone, just footprints leading into the woods that stopped abruptly after 20 yards. The event reignited public curiosity. Online forums exploded with theories that Daniel had returned, or that someone was using his image to send a message. Rebecca, exhausted from years of unanswered questions, refused to engage with speculation. Instead, she focused on preserving his legacy, funding searches, and documenting the inconsistencies in the case herself. She published her findings in a digital archive titled The Hollow Record. It included copies of the leaked RHV documents, a detailed timeline of Daniel's last known movements, and every redacted file she could legally obtain through Freedom of Information requests. Within weeks, her website was taken offline by a copyright claim issued by an anonymous government source. By then, it had become clear the case of Agent Daniel Harlow would never see a formal resolution. Every new clue was met with silence, every revelation with redaction. Still, something strange continued to happen around Ravens Hollow. Hikers reported hearing the faint hum of machinery at night. Others described seeing distant, flickering lights deep within the forest, long after the Bureau declared the site fully decommissioned. To the public, the case remained a mystery. To those who followed it closely, it felt like a warning. By 2020, the name Daniel Harlow had become more than just a missing persons case. It had become a symbol of something deeper within the Bureau's own history. Officially, he was still listed as missing, presumed deceased. Unofficially, his case was whispered about in corners of Washington offices as the file that never stayed closed. Despite the Bureau's silence, fragments of information continued to surface. Former agents, speaking off record, described a restricted vault used to store classified incident materials. Within those archives, it was rumored, lay the remnants of the Ravens Hollow investigation, videos, transcriptions, and logs from the night of Daniel's disappearance. One former analyst, whose identity was concealed for safety, claimed to have seen a portion of that footage. According to his account, the final recording didn't show a struggle or confrontation. It showed Daniel stopping his bike abruptly, dismounting, and staring toward the tree line, toward something unseen, just beyond the camera's infrared range. Moments later, the thermal image flickered, and Daniel simply disappeared from the frame. No movement. No sound. The signal ended 3 seconds later. The analyst said the footage was marked as inconclusive interference. But what unsettled him most was the final note attached by the reviewing officer. It read, "Do not pursue correlation. Observation confirmed." That single line deepened the mystery. Observation confirmed, of what? When Rebecca learned of this alleged footage, she requested access through legal channels, citing her right as a family member. The Bureau denied the request, claiming the material posed potential risks to ongoing security interests. She appealed twice. Both times, the request was denied. Meanwhile, digital security experts reviewing the leaked metadata from the Hollow record discovered another anomaly, a timestamp from 2010 that seemed to reference an unknown device transmitting near Ravens Hollow weeks after Daniel vanished. It was identified as a short-range encrypted signal, using technology not publicly available at the time. The signal had only one transmission entry, labeled Return Protocol. What it meant, no one could say. But the discovery implied that whatever had been operating in those woods was still active, long after Daniel's last ride. By that point, Rebecca had come to a painful acceptance. She no longer sought to prove what happened. She only wanted acknowledgement that her husband's disappearance was not random, and that the truth, whatever it was, had been deliberately buried. Still, each year, on April 9th, she visited the trail. And every year, she found the same thing waiting: silence. By 2024, the story of Special Agent Daniel Harlow had faded from headlines, but not from memory. His disappearance had become one of those cases whispered about in training academies, used as a quiet example of how even the most vigilant can vanish without leaving a trace. But beneath the official silence, a subtle unease remained within the Bureau. Internal audits of archived projects showed numerous irregularities in funding, unreported subcontractor activity, and multiple redacted pages tied to Ravens Hollow. The phrase, "containment successful," appeared repeatedly in reports spanning nearly a decade. To the public, Daniel was remembered as a man who served with integrity. To those who'd read his final case file, He was the one who got too close to something hidden in plain sight. In late 2024, a retired systems analyst anonymously mailed a sealed envelope to an independent journalist. Inside were 3 printed photographs, grainy, infrared stills taken from an aerial surveillance drone over Ravens Hollow. The first showed the trail intersection Daniel used nightly. The second showed the entrance to the underground hatch long since resealed. The third showed a faint human silhouette standing beside a glowing object deep within the forest, its shape indistinct but unmistakably present. None of the images could be authenticated. The Bureau refused to comment. Still, those who saw them noticed something chilling. In the first photograph, barely visible in the lower corner, was the reflection of a bike's rear light. It was faint, blurred, but there. When asked whether it could have been Daniel's, the analyst simply wrote back, "Not unless he came back." Rebecca never received official closure, but she no longer needed it. In her final public statement before withdrawing from media appearances, she said, "I stopped searching for answers the day I realized the truth might already be watching us." Her words struck a chord. Online communities dedicated to cold cases now refer to the incident as the Harlow pattern, a term describing vanishings that share one haunting similarity: unexplained interference, missing evidence, and silence from the institutions involved. Today, the Ravens Hollow Trail remains closed to the public. No signs mark its entrance, and satellite imagery still blurs the coordinates where Daniel's GPS last transmitted. For most, it's just another restricted government zone. But for those who know the story, it's the place where an honest man rode into the unknown and never came back. Some stories never end. They simply fade into the static of unanswered questions. The disappearance of Agent Daniel Harlow isn't just a case file or a headline. It's a mirror reflecting the quiet fear of how truth can vanish when it's too close to power. Whether he was silenced, taken, or simply lost to something the world was never meant to understand, one fact remains: his helmet, his message, and his final trail all point to a place that still resists explanation. If you found this story haunting, mysterious, or thought-provoking, remember, cases like this still happen. Somewhere, someone else is asking the same question Rebecca Harlow did: what really happened that night? Subscribe for more true crime mysteries and unsolved disappearances where the silence tells the loudest story.